Continuation of a previous video in a sense. What I want to look at here is demonstrate how to use Time Lords in Delphic Oracle, but with regard to a particular technique known as zodiacal releasing from the lot of spirit. Now, the lot of spirit is calculated different ways depending on whether the chart is diurnal or nocturnal, and also there's another bit of variation depending on whether or not the moon is above the horizon in a nocturnal chart, whether to use the diurnal formula for calculating the lot of fortune, and therefore conversely the lot of spirit usually falls in the other the opposite or sign, or basically the one that's symmetrical to the horizon. I'm not going to go too much into all that. What I wanted to do is look at a particular section in Valens as translated by Robert Schmidt, and just to demonstrate the importance of this one technique in particular for zodiacal releasing from the lot of spirit. Now, first we have to evaluate the chart to really know whether, not everybody becomes President of the United States as shown in this chart here, George W. Bush. And there are various reasons, or I should say technical matters that have to be looked into to determine eminence. For example, if Trigon Lords of the sect light are favorably situated or not. In this case, the Trigon Lords, in Bush's case, are by day, because it's in the Sun is in Cancer. We have Venus, and then we have the Moon and Mars. I think in this case Mars assists with a. So Venus by day, Mars by night, and the Moon assisting, I should say. We can check it by going here where Universal Hermetics, I think it's up here a little bit farther. Universal Hermetics report, and we'll give you a Venus, then Mars, and the Moon assists. So all those are contrary to sect, but as we know, Bush didn't prevent Bush from becoming president. So, but there was a considerable time of difficulty at the very beginning of his term. We'll find out why later. Now, what I want to look into here, there are some aphorisms in Valens. One that's very important for determining when one is, if they're going to become famous, when that will happen. And it's shown, if you have, for example, a lot of exaltation that happens to be in the 10th house, that's a pretty clear indication right there that a person will become eminent, but it's not in itself. It's more important what happens to the domicile lord. Now, a lot of spirit here is also in Taurus, so we know that Venus and the Moon, and more particularly in this case Venus, because the Moon's an aversion, although it's in liking girding sign. It's here, it just happens to be in the 10th place from a lot of fortune, and Valens talks about this. I'm going to read a direct quote from the Schmidt translation of Valens in Book 4, page 14. It says, "If then the division should come from spirit to the mid-heaven of the lot of fortune," and by division I mean here the Time Lords as they're being handed out from Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and so on. If it should come to the mid-heaven of the lot of fortune, or even to the lot itself, while the Lord is co-present and is witnessed by benefics, or else the Sun or Moon, with the support being quite brilliant. Now, what that means there, with the support being quite brilliant, this is referring to the Trigon Lords, the sect light. In other words, if the Trigon Lords are in good places, in this case it's Venus, Mars, and the Moon, really kind of middling, except for Venus. Venus is extraordinary, being angular and in the 10th from fortune. With a superb being quite brilliant, the child will come into leadership and great reputation, and will be notable and fit for rule and highly visible for those times. And now what he's referring to, it has to come to the midheaven of the lot of fortune. In this case, we're talking about a derivative house system here. So if we're counting from here, we got Scorpio is the first, Sagittarius is the second, Capricorn's third, Aquarius is 4, Pisces is 5, Aries is 6, Taurus is 7, Gemini is 8, Cancer is 9, and Leo is the 10th house. And that's the 10th whole sign houses as counting from the lot of fortune. It's Leo. So if the division comes to such a place, those times will be brilliant. Now, what you have for Leo is that period lasts 19 years in the zodiacal releasing. I'm going to bring that up right now. And we have right here, he starts out at Taurus for first 8 years of life. Of course, as a child, most of us don't really come into any sort of prominence unless it happens to be like acting as a child or something like that. Like Danny Bonaducci, for example, in the Partridge Family. You know, there are a lot of child actors who run into that situation. If they might have, might be a useful study to see if such start out, for example, in the 10th from fortune, or if, for example, for some reason they have an angular, dignified planet that's angular from fortune. As these will, typically all show someone whose actions are highly beneficial or basically able to be actualized in a favorable manner. So in this case, we find that Butch reached that period in October 1998. Now, this is a period shortly before he became president. Everybody was talking about him. Corporations were grooming him to run. His buddies were all trying to seek a way for him to get into office, and he had a lot of good connections. And he was popular at the time. Venus is the planet of popularity, by the way, so that's also the nature of the planet. Now, he gets there, he is nominated, I don't remember exactly, I think it was June of 1999 that he actually declared that he was running. That's right there, June 10th. Right around, I think it was the 11th, like the next day that he declared that he was going to run. And then that's the Aquarius period. So that turns on the Sun and Saturn. And we see the Sun and Saturn are in the 12th house. Now, in modern astrology, this would be considered not so good. But it also, in Hellenistic astrology, if we're counting from the lot of fortune, that's the 9th from fortune, which is considered Valens said that they had the power of the god, what they call the goddess or god, or the 9th from fortune, which is the joy of the sun. And it is a place which we don't usually associate with kingship, but it's the 9th house was considered the house of kings, and primarily this was because all the cadent places, for one thing, they were all called metacosmios, meaning between worlds, but it also means it's kind of like a beginning or a fresh start. When you divide the zodiac circle into 4, you basically have 3 subsections. You got the cadent, then you got the angular, and then you got the succeedent. The cadent typically begins something new. The angular brings it to a peak or to perfection, and then the succeedent period usually finishes up or tidies up or makes or continues on with what was going on before, but maybe just to a little less intensity than before. So here we have the ninth being, or it's there, and this is indicating kingship and leisure to some. I mean, this is because of the leisure nature of all four of the Caden angles, or I should say the Caden houses, and this is relative to fortune as well as natally. Now, so he reaches that peak period, and he's still in it until 2016. So maybe I want to see if there is a more particular time. Now, we know that he became president in 2001 with the oath of office. It was late 2000. He was, well, that was a big controversy there. So we had a lot of trouble during that Virgo period. And you see Mars there, contrary to sect. So within the 19 years of Leo, which he's been highly visible, now a former president, but also one that's somewhat reviled by in certain quarters. We had at the beginning of his period the controversy, which is quite typically it's shown by Mars being in Virgo, cooking of the books more or less. Also the economy being turning out to be in rough shape. Now, what I said this in another article once, that he has fortune in Scorpio, and that makes the 11th place, which is called the house of accomplishment or acquisition. It's called accomplishment in the Riley translation of Valens. They're both pretty good translations. The acquisitive place is also how one makes money. Now, I want to get beyond personal. Everybody else wants to blame Bush for things. Well, I would say that the chart of the leader represents what the nation needs to go through and some hash out sort of karmically, so to speak. The previous President Clinton had the acquisition in Taurus with the moon exalted and Wall Street boomed, and that was a very apt description. I think, and I know some people stick fortune at the very end of Gemini. I think that, given the lack of accuracy of clocks, especially back in the 40s, being only a sneeze away from fortune being in Cancer for that chart, and therefore the acquisition is very likely, in my opinion. But then almost the opposite happened. You had fortune in Scorpio during the Bush years, and Enron, WorldCom, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all these companies basically went under, cooking their books and basically leaving a huge pile of debt. It represents the banking system that was basically gone corrupt. And this is shown by Mars and Virgo, basically cooking the books. Books being Virgo and Mars being cooking. Well, also Mars is a planet that is said to want more than its share. Anyway, I'm just pointing that out. But this is also a time of controversy where people were saying, well, he wasn't really elected to office. He just the Supreme Court put him in, and so people like George Carlin were calling him Governor Bush because that was the last thing that he had that going for him as far as a legitimate office. Well, some of this might be explained by the 12th house, Sun and Saturn being present, but more of it, there's more to it than that. But what I wanted to do is point out that now, if you're looking for you got this 19-year period and you don't know what to do with it, well, things kind of come to a head. If you would say the focus of the period, and this is Schmidt Schmidt's work, he pointed this out, that when you're looking at the general period of, say, Leo, for example, well, the domicile lord is the sun, so he theorized that maybe we should be looking at the sub-period that contains the sun. And so we're coming into, for right now, for example, he just went into a Cancer period. Now, he's been out of sight for a number of years, but this supposedly is going to be a defining period for, this is when everything's going to come into focus for him. I don't know why right now, what that's saying exactly, but maybe the chickens will come home to roost to some extent. This is certainly a difficult time in terms of the cardinal crisis. Theodore White and William Stick Evers both talk about it at length, and we're in a very troubling period. I'll explain this probably in an article. I'm not going to talk about this now. So anyway, if we want to look at sub-periods, that's one. We can take this and double-click, and we'll just take a look at the onset of that period. And what I have here is a whole bunch of stuff that you probably never seen before shows up. Basically, what I did was I automatically generated charts based on the time in which the onset is here. So if you see, you got January 10, 2014. I've got it set up for annual perfections on the the natal charts on the inside, and you got perfections, and then you got transits, and then I've got on the outside, I think, is zodiacal releasing from fortune or spirit here. Spirit would have to be. So this is the onset of the period. But the use of this is to try to narrow down, if you've got something going on, say you're looking at spirit, maybe you want to look at annual perfections of the ascendant, because when that comes to the 10th place, that will also bundle up, basically show the application of increased visibility and so on. So I could take that, we could look at, this isn't really showing perfection wise, it's in the second house. Okay. No, it's the 8th actually. And then the monthly perfection of the second at that time, which is just the recent past. But I can go through all of these, and then I can look for, basically I'm looking for a Taurus perfection. Aries, it was a little later. So yeah, so he was in the 10th house perfection, so he was pretty much at his peak around the end of his first term. Well, as far as visibility and everything, and this was well after the 9/11. But we noticed that during the Virgo period he was having a lot of trouble until 9/11. And what happened was he went from Virgo to the encounter of the domicile lord of Mercury in Leo. And again, this is what Schmidt calls the encounter of the domicile lord, and that was during let's see, down here we got okay, it was the Leo period, and that started August 16th and lasted until the end of September. So we know that that period was a focus period for the Virgo period, which was very controversial, and that kind of ended it right there. It brought everything outside the realm of controversy, and it was the Aquarius sub-period, which reiterated Sun and Saturn, and they were both in the 9th place from fortune, which is quite favorable. And I double click, and I see that he's got Taurus monthly perfection going on. So again, 10th house, highly visible, and basically that's when everything got shut down as far as being able to say anything negative about what was going on. So and we've been consistently going down the road to police state and fascism ever since. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to demonstrate here, we'll close this out. Well, first I should explain what is being done with the auto-generated charts. You can, for example, I've got this shown here. I've got it set up so that the natal is in the inside. You got, perfections here, transits, and then spirit. You can have any number of different Time Lord systems. These are on the left-hand side where you can select any one of those. I can add up to 5, so I could have, like for example, set up like that, click save, and then click save here. And then I'm going to just add another technique here. We'll do, let's go to press F5, and I want to say Valens extended here. I just double click the theme, and this will set up all the different Time Lord systems I want to see on the right hand side in this order, because whatever order I drag this to, it will bring it to. So I want these shown in the same order there. So if I click on draw, notice that decennials, lunar quarters, zodiacal, releasing fortune, and spirit are all in the same order as listed. So you just drag it in the order. You click save here, and then you click save, and that will give you your list. Now the use of this is to see if there is any unusual buildup of similar time periods, for example. So I want to go forward in time. This is 1990. Let's go to, okay, so he's in a Leo period right around here. That's 1998. Virgo period here. So I want to see if there's any unusual buildup. Some of these, you got to realize, some are topically specific, and others are more general, like decennials, lunar quarters, and so on. Some of them are more specific, though, like perfections for the sun, for one's actions and movement, for the moon, one's personal life, and so on. They're topically, but you could focus in, for example, on just decennials and lunar quarters and see if you've got, on the broad view, if some Time Lords. Now in decennials, he was pretty much in a Sun-Saturn, and they're both in the 9th house from fortune, which is the house of kings, in leisure. So anyway, again, click anywhere on a graph and it will update. This is now showing 5 wheels, basically: zodiacal, releasing fortune, spirit, and perfections, with transits to the natal wheel. I don't have to get that complicated. It's generally advisable just to stick with maybe 1 or 2. So I'll hit F3. I'll get rid of, since I'm doing zodiacal, releasing fortune, just look at transits, perfections, and, or as to say, fortune, spirit. So click save, and then I can zero in on the dates. You can see the date changes as I move the mouse, but when you hover over the glyph, it will zero in on the date, and then I can click. Okay, so this was around Inauguration Day right there. Just a couple days later, he took the oath of office. So in this way, you can see what's active at any given time. And the graph is meant for long-range sorts of things, to see if there is any unusual buildup of Time Lords. But that can be used for those also specific topics too. You don't have to go, and you can combine it with other windows. So let me just get rid of this. And the other thing that one ought to realize, if I'm going with primary directions, for example, which is another, well, it was formulated as circumambulations as a Time Lord system through Valens, but there is also something known as directions through the bounds, and you can go through, just take one bound, for example. If I was to take Ptolemy, let's see, the ascendant through the, we do ascendant through the bounds. Let's just take the sun through the bounds. And if I double click there, the selections will all go back to the sun, bounds, and just do it according to the options here. Click save, and then I click here. Okay, now I have a list of bounds that being going. This is looking at about 100 and some odd years. So we get to the Cancer, Leo, let's see, right around here. This is when he becomes president. The sun was in the bounds of Mars. In the last terms, basically that's where Regulus would be, and that's when he became ruler. So anyway, that's it for this. I'm just going to point that out as different things that you can do with Delphic Oracle 7. Thank you.